All right, all right. Hello, everyone. We are here again, Lunes with Luke. We are still looking at the book of Acts. We are using Willie James Jennings' commentary in the Belief series to walk through some things. We started looking at chapter 4 last week, so if you missed that, you can go back and check that out somewhere on the lines. And it looks like let's see, I think Leonard is here. Hey, Leonard.
How you doing, sir?
I'm well. How are you?
Hey, just pushing on. I see everybody bail
Just,
out on me. Right?
I know, right? Yeah, big exodus today. It was
Yeah.
no, it's understandable. This summer, and then I don't know, staying busy in the summer gets hard. You feel like you're supposed to be somewhere else.
It
Supposed
seems
to be
like
on the beach. But
more people are
yeah.
doing more things in the summer. So it's year
Yeah.
round the same thing there.
Yeah. Does your church slow down in the summer at all, or does it keep going pretty heavy?
Attendance does. And I'm taking a break from Bible study in August, and I've got a convention in Atlanta this week, and then one in Virginia Beach. So I do my church school on Saturday, but I'm gonna take 3 weeks off because it's no use to be off one, then come back the next week and then off again.
Right. Yeah. Well, sounds good. Well, yeah, we started this chapter 4 with Jennings last week. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to
No, it's just powerful. Like I said,
Yeah.
anytime I pick up Jennings, and you get a whole new picture on what we read, because we sanitize it, so we make it so holy. We don't see that thing, the between the power and the powerless, and
Right.
how our message should always be challenging power rather than what we see so much now. We're embracing the power and giving power more than it should have.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's I think we read the first paragraph last week, and we didn't get much further. We didn't get much further than the first paragraph of this section 4. I mean, there's still some of it. I mean, that to me is just still trying to think about more. This speaking holy words has serious consequences. This distinction between just talking about God and speaking holy words about God. And this line here, the holy words that bring consequences are words tied to the concrete, liberating actions of God for broken people. Such holy words bring the speaker into direct confrontation with those in power, like you were just saying.
And when he talks about the criminal man and how Jesus is predestined to challenge those in power and confront power, spiritual and human.
Right. Yeah. I thought that, that's an interesting word choice. From someone who comes out of the kind of that Reformed Baptist background, that's a pretty to use the word predestined is pretty weighted, I think.
Yeah, but
sure.
This so ties in with a devotional I do every morning. It's called Hearing God Through the Years, a 365-day devotional, and it's always talking about, like, tomorrow we'll be speaking the word, and this morning, chants versus spells. But it's always talking about how God speaks and how do we respond when God speaks. How the word has so much power. And when I read that, it just tied in and just said so much. And how, Jesus gives them power, and how
Mhm.
Jesus will give us power if we just embrace it. But so many times, uh, and like you said, Jennings coming out of tradition where he comes out of, where you've got this power structure of deacons, and they sit up there all big and bold and everything, sort of like the modern day Sanhedrin. And if the pastor goes
Mhm.
down the wrong road, you're finished. You
Right.
just like Peter, who gave you
Mhm.
the power to say this?
Mhm. Mhm. Right. Right. Yeah. 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 It's interesting how we have so many interchurch dynamics. That especially when it comes to power and especially relationship, not just power within the church, but the way some elements of the church have power in the political realm as well. That
E-
that
e- Even though the man said, "Do they really believe that stuff?"
right, right, right.
And it's
Yeah.
it's a little hypocritical. Uh, I'm doing, I have a monthly column in a rural newspaper, and
Hmm.
we've got this call for theocracy now. And see, I
Hmm.
remember when the Shah of Iran, was overthrown, and because the U.S. government supported the Shah, and because the Shah made sure the United States got plenty of Iranian oil when this
Hmm.
theocracy was set up, it was the worst thing in the world. Well, to me, it doesn't make any difference whether theocracy is Islamic, Jewish, or Christianity. If it's bad for one thing, it's bad for everything. And we're talking
Right.
about setting up that same thing.
Hmm.
And and it's in direct opposition to what we have in the text today, because the Sanhedrin, even though it's a Roman government, the Sanhedrin was a group of religious people who were
Hmm.
given power to deal with a whole lot of religious and legal things back then. So,
Right.
like you say, it's that funny power thing instead of,
Mhm.
uh, I was reading about, he talking about location. They had lost that location. In
Right.
other words, they had become a part and co-conspirators in oppressing their very brothers and
Right.
sisters who they were supposed to
Right.
represent.
Yeah. 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 I think that. Yeah. That. I, we talked last week about this. About his use of the word holy as well.
Mhm.
As kind of a connecting this word holy with Jesus in the sense of going to the broken, going to the oppressed. That the holy words are the ones that speak liberation and go to the people that you just meant, that you talked about, that some of the leaders had turned against. And I just been thinking a lot about that because of how I grew up, in that kind of fundamentalist, non-denominational background where, holiness was, you know, keeping yourself clean from certain from certain things. And that was the holiness you practice. But I think that there's I think it's a very Old Testament understanding of what it means to be set apart as God's people. That the prophets would talk about, that we don't practice the power the way that other people practice. We don't treat the widow, the orphan, and that's how we
Yeah,
show that we are a different people.
right, there you
Um,
go.
yeah.
And when you read the prophets, it's over and over again. Jesus says it time and time again. But our version of holiness, because we think we act a certain way and do a certain thing, it keeps us from reaching people, that we've deemed unholy, demonic, anything,
Mhm.
instead of just reaching out. And like I always say, there are always two voices inside of all of us. We made in the image of God. And so God is always speaking inspiration, but we also got evil spirits speaking temptation. And
Right.
we have to try to stay in the presence of God to
Right.
keep that inspiration. But if we don't bring other people in the presence of God, when are they going to ever hear that inspiration? All they're going to
Right.
hear is a temptation, and we keep condemning them to a worse situation.
Right. 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 And meanwhile, we're separated off in our communities, you know, living in temptation ourselves. A lot of these church people, you got to be careful about that. you their holiness don't quite look the right way, does it? Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it looks real bad.
Yeah.
It looks real bad.
Yeah. Yeah. This, I think, the end of this paragraph kind of says a similar thing that we've been saying, and this what Mark brought this up last time, the great illusion of followers of Jesus, especially those who imagine themselves leaders, is that they could live a path different from Jesus and his disciples. They believe somehow they can be loved, or at least liked, or at least tolerated, or even ignored by those with real power in the world. Um,
Yeah,
this illusion is born of forgetfulness of location, like you were saying. Yeah.
and see, that's what we have right now with what I call the religion of Jesus versus the religion about Jesus, where Jesus has been weaponized. I don't know whether you saw the thing on CNN. I didn't see the story, but I read the article about Christian nationalism, and how they said, Jesus has been turned into this kick butt savior, who will reinstitute the Christian government, in the United States by force if necessary. When, if you read the Gospels, I never see an instance where Jesus made anybody do anything. He changed people by his words and his actions.
Right. I was looking for, I don't think I have it down here. Chris Hedges has a book, American Fascists, I think it's called. It's about the religious right. He spent, he's a writer and spent some time, living, interviewing and working, and it's a pretty dark, pretty dark look at that reality.
Yeah, my wife just gave me Jesus and John Wayne, and then she gave me Raphael Warnock's new book, and then I got Rick Beholder's book because I just love Rich Beholder's out of New York. He's good, kind, and beautiful. I met him in Alexandria at a meeting, and both of us didn't know where we were going, and we started up this conversation. And then I go and sit in the auditorium, and then he's up there speaking. I said, "Wow, man! I didn't realize you had it like this." I've been following him since then, but
someone in my church was just telling me about that they're reading the Jesus and John Wayne book. I think the author of that is at Calvin College there in Grand Rapids, where I lived near there for a while. So yeah,
but we have a challenge. We have a challenge as Christians because let's just be honest. The nation is no longer majority church going, and I think that's our problem. I grew up in the Methodist tradition, and so when I would go to D.C. and go to the Supreme Court, then you could just walk in the Supreme Court, walk around. But right next door, almost on the next corner, was the Methodist building. Their headquarters was right there. And because everybody, it wasn't, how I want to say this, it wasn't like they were going to say, we are in control, but because everybody went to church and everybody was elected, that's the way it was. But, we're much more diverse now. And so,
yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And we're not going to make more people join the church by making them act a certain way.
Right. Right.
Right.
Well, I think it's, one of the things that I've always, when it comes to the abortion issue, one of the things that always kind of struck me about that is people's unwillingness to actually, you know, try to convince and talk to people who they, who they think are doing wrong. I mean, like if you think, if you think that someone is doing something wrong and you don't want them to not do it, it seems like like you're saying, the way that Jesus would approach that is to, to try to show
Mhm.
them maybe a different way to do things, instead of saying, well, we're going to make a law about it so that no one can do it. So we don't have to worry about actually, convincing anyone or loving anyone or caring about anyone. We just
Yeah,
have to,
well,
we just have to make it a one way.
yeah, he would tell a story, and
Hmm.
in a language that the people would understand. And like
Right.
somebody was saying the other day, the average parable of Jesus is like something like less than 20 seconds. And just think
Hmm.
about sermons could be that short and
Right.
effective. Yeah.
Right. Right. Right.
But I'm gonna
Well,
plead guilty to 20, 25
I,
minutes.
yeah, I was going to say people are already cheering in expectation that we could make it that short, but yeah. No, I hear you. That's yeah, it's yeah, I think this it's interesting, this, because I think he talks. I remember in the talks that he gave at Union, one of the things that he talked a lot about was this idea of location and geography, and pla the place, where you are, and figuring out, your place. And I think that's uh, I think that's an interesting thing to keep going back to, because I think that we have a tendency to kind of, I think when we get in our heads about our theology and about our thinking, that we kind of think that it doesn't matter, where we are, as long, long as we have the truth or whatever, like it applies all over the place. But we forget that there's, some specific location that matter, you know.
Yeah. But when he talked about that geography, for years,
Hmm.
I have flown across the country and looked at how the land was laid out in those
Hmm.
parks and just thought that was the way it was supposed to be. And he
Hmm.
made it clear, that was a Jeffersonian thing.
Hmm.
And then
Right.
I'm teaching the introduction to theology starting in August. And that's one of the things which you said that, I'm trying to make clear, because most of the authors, our theology is very Euro American centric,
Yeah.
whereas the
Hmm.
church is growing bigger in Africa and South
Right.
America. And I mean, even one author talked about how there are no real voices out there. And I'm saying to myself, I mean, they don't recognize Jennings because they don't, Jennings is a
Right.
real voice, but most people don't want to hear it because they don't
Right.
like when you say it. And then when
Right.
you look at, all both of us had the privilege of studying under Katie Geneva Cameron, who came
Right.
up with the whole theological process that has lasted since,
Mhm.
she instituted in 1985,
Right.
and he's talking about how short term things are. But when it speaks truth, it's going to be
Mhm.
around, and we
Right.
just have to be willing. We've got so much biblical study that's still being
Right.
revealed, understanding of
Right.
language and whatnot. That we just because what Augustine said lasted for 800 years, and what
Mhm.
uh, what Luther and Calvin said last all these years. It doesn't mean that we build on that, but
Right.
it's not. Nothing is fixed. I mean, and that's why Barker was received so bad, because he had a different look on things.
Mhm. Yeah.
But we got to
Well, I
be
mean,
very. Very aware
The-
of our location,
yeah. Well, and I think the benefit that we have now that most people that are in a hierarchical power position don't necessarily think is an advantage is you know when Augustine was writing in those times there was only a select few people that actually could study and learn and know all those things, and they could have their little debates, and if you disagreed with the two or three other people, you could just get them excommunicated or later on burned to stake, So now that we have, you know, more people can read, more people can figure things out themselves, more people can speak, you have this opportunity to hear, from more and more people. And so of course it's going to change. It's going to change all the time because, you know, there's people you never listened to that are talking now that never had a chance to talk. It reminds me of when they talk about different people's views on slavery and how they were just people of their time, and they didn't know any better. It is like, well, that's because they're not reading or listening to anything the slaves were saying. They could have told you they could have told you free and clear, real clear that it was not right and not good. Like you just weren't listening to the people you needed to be listening to,
Yeah, well, that's a problem we all have, and with the advances in this, I want to call it cognitive science, that, people have been trained in how to address things that speak in a way that is what we want to hear. And we'll embrace it, even if it's not good for us. And,
right.
I mean, if you look at the way people don't vote in their best interest. They vote in what sounds good to them, because
right.
you can't tell me that people in the Southern Belt don't want health care, but they will continually vote to deny Medicaid expansion. I mean, even the basic program that's paid by the federal government, and so
no, exactly.
And it's getting and it's developing now. I have to even be careful myself that not to read the headline, to read the entire story, because the headlines get to us.
Yeah, yeah. No, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I was gonna look. Let's see.
While you look
Yeah,
at
so I was just gonna say this next little part here. I mean, this is where it gets into the criminality thing, which we don't. But he says, well, I mean, I think actually, it's hard not to read all of it. It's kind of like, he talks about this illusion that we can somehow live a life different than Jesus. But the disciples are among common people proclaiming liberation and that violence and death are no longer the ultimate power. Jesus is risen. There, from the sight of the common, holy words touch two intersecting nerves, the religious and the political. For some in power, these disciples speak heresy. Jesus is the power of God. While for others in power, these disciples speak sedition. Jesus is the power. Only criminals touch nerves at this level and receive the consequences. So they arrested them and put them in custody. Real preaching and authentic teaching is inextricably bound to real criminality.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to say while you were looking. That is so powerful.
Yeah.
That when we say these things, we touch nerves. We touch nerves, and I'm glad I've been gifted to be able to write in a way that touches, but concise and factual. That people will come up to me in the grocery store and said, "Oh,
Hmm.
that's the one that wrote the article." In fact, the pastor called me the other week, and he said, "We need you." He said, "Because you say it in a way that you can get away with it, but
Right,
you
right.
tell the truth. You tell the
Yeah,
truth." Because
yeah,
sometimes I'm wondering, the editor will say, "You can't write for me anymore because you know
right.
Middlesex is a very wealthy county, number one, when it
Hmm.
comes to there's a lot of people who've retired from Richmond have moved
Mm,
there, but then it
hmm.
is very conservative. It's a church not far from me that I was told that they told some people they would be better off attending another church. And then when we had a district meeting there, uh, one of the pastors held three of my members a little late in the group. And when they went to come back into the meeting, they told them they were late. They couldn't come back into the building. So, we got,
Mm, hmm.
that's
Yes.
what I'm
Yeah.
dealing with, So,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
when
it's
that criminality. And so, I
yeah.
realize when I say things, but to me, that's what it's all about. I mean, when you got all of these, if you go back and read the Old Testament, you've got all of these priests and high priests. And if
Hmm.
their names are mentioned, sometimes they're only mentioned once. But the
Hmm.
very people who were calling the government out, the criminals, the
Hmm.
the
Right.
Isaiahs, the
Right.
Elishas, the Amoses.
Mm,
Those are the people
mhm.
we're talking about today. And I don't even think people realize, the dynamics of what's going on, that
Right.
those who are challenging this power,
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
learning, this social order. I like how Jennings put that when he talks about the judges. They got all of this stuff going for them. You know, uh,
Mhm.
people in the Bible that we say we're following, they're the ones speaking out against this all the time.
Right. Yeah. 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 And I think it's interesting because I th- I think another way that people, in some ways people say, well, yes, this was true back then, you know, but now, some people say, well, now we're a Christian nation, so why would we find ourselves in a position of criminality, when it's our doctrine or what, or whatever, I mean, something like that. Um, or they just don't think it still applies, that I don't know how they think that, but I know that they do, that this is something of the past, but yeah.
Yeah, well, if it was something of the past, why in a nation where we have so many people in need, and
Hmm.
then when you look at it worldview, I mean, it's
Hmm.
really sad. And
Hmm.
then I look back. I was reading an article this morning in the New York Times where the Congo is going to
Mm.
auction off land for oil drilling, where it's one of the last refuges for gorillas, along with part of their forests. And I'm saying to myself, colonialization negated
Hmm.
these people so much that now they have even lost their connection with nature. And
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
just hurt me to my heart to see that, because
Hmm.
people from Africa is a very spiritual
Hmm.
continent, for
Yeah.
native people,
Yeah.
they might have practiced religion. Well, I learned they have the pro religions. In other words, a lot of the things we do came out of their religions. And just like
Hmm.
the Native Americans here, they're very connected to the land
Right.
with the indigenous religions. And when you see a nation like that, because of what the Belgian king, how he killed so many people, that they've
Hmm.
even lost the sense of themselves. And they actually say our priority is not to save the planet. It's so we can get some of this wealth. That's how, how
Hmm.
how crazy things have gotten. And and as Christians in this, if we're gonna call this a Christian nation, we've got to speak to things like that.
Right. Right. Yeah. 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 Well, and we probably wouldn't take much to find out that, lo and behold, it's one of our companies that's going to help them get that oil
Oh,
out of the
oh
ground. Right. Right.
yeah.
Oh. Or if there's some people there who have a different opinion, that we've got some
Yeah,
friends
they'll
over
end
there
up,
with ready
they'll end
to
up,
take care of them.
yeah, they end up like Patrice Lumumba.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the part for me that, where it really strikes home for us today in our particular location is because, you know, it's hard for us to not speak out against things because we live in the place that is dominating and oppressing so many different people, and has their hands in so many different, pots. And then it would be one thing if in that, we were living in a place that actually was providing for everybody here, but it's not even doing that. So it's like there's 2 or 3 levels of complaint that we need to be that we need to be making. You know,
Yeah,
yeah,
well, I mean, we have what we have because I mean, like I said, we vote against our best interests. We change
Mhm.
tax policy that allow executives to make all they want to make. So they did away with the middle
Mhm.
class. They did away with manufacturing, and they sent it all to China and in Indonesia and
Mhm.
now the Chinese and a lot of people in Southeast Asia are getting rich, and so now they're gonna send the manufacturing to Africa. I mean, because the labor is cheaper there, and so
Mhm.
yeah, I like my iPhone, but it bothers me that the people who make the
Right.
iPhone, the people who make the tennis shoes that I wear, they
Mhm.
get paid so little. I mean, they
Right.
get paid sometimes less than what we make in a week for a whole year.
Right. Yeah, I was looking at this. Some people had done a study about the iPhone in particular, and said that I can't remember now what it's some outrageous amount if you were to make the iPhone
Yeah, ten
in the
thousand dollars.
yeah in the United States. You
Uh-huh.
know,
Yeah, ten
I mean
thousand
that's
dollars. That Steve Chappelle made a joke about it, saying he's glad
mhm,
they're making it over there because he said he wouldn't want to pay $10,000 for one.
right, yeah. Well, and it impacts so many places. I mean, because you have all the stuff that gets taken out of Africa, all the minerals and all the little, you know, all those things that need to go in there to for the phone, and then it gets, like you say, it gets assembled where people are ready to jump out of the building just because it's so miserable there. Yeah, I mean,
And I mean, and then when you look at the child labor that's being used
mhm,
when extracting those minerals in Africa, and the number
right,
of children who are dying, and they need to be talking about blood minerals in addition to
hmm,
blood diamonds, because
right,
that's the way it is. A lot of blood is being shed
right,
for us to have these materials.
right. Maybe they need a little right to life campaign for the
Well,
for those children.
I, well, we'll see. It's only about the womb. It's not when you come out. It's not.
Right,
It's
right,
when
right, right, right.
and
And
the
it
way
definitely ain't gonna impact, and it definitely ain't gonna go if you gotta pay more for the iPhone. Then
and to me,
certain priorities have to stay intact.
yeah, it's all about maintaining this so-called order of God that people
Mm,
want, where the man works and the woman stays at home.
mhm,
And so when you pass a law like this, it that's what it does. The woman is at home because she's pregnant all the time. And Cheryl, I see, has something to say. But
mhm,
when I teach, I told you I'm doing theology, but my specialty, I'm a adjunct professor of Christian ethics.
mhm,
when we get to abortion, this is the hardest issue we have to face because we've
Mhm.
made it a female issue when there was only one immaculate conception. And then we
Mhm.
shame people so when they get pregnant. And now, they're talking about uh, banning contraception. But I mean, it's just a conversation we need to have.
Mhm.
Yeah. So seldom bold enough to vote for or think differently from our parents or community. And I'm glad you said that, Cheryl, because that's the problem we have with racism. It's not that it's being taught everywhere like it used to be, but it's never been condemned theologically. And so it's still passed from generation to generation.
Mhm.
Uh, that theology has to be untaught, but nobody wants to do it.
Right. That's just me telling. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think that's yeah, and well, again, some of that community that she's talking about, ends up being people's churches where people aren't
Mhm.
speaking together and talking together and saying the things that they need to be saying,
And see,
yeah.
you see it in the South where it's First Baptist Church on both sides of the street, and it's in Richmond. If you went down 9 Mile Road, actually in Highland Springs, there were two churches right together with the same name next door to each other. One was a black church and one was a white church, and they gave them the land because they didn't want to worship with the formerly enslaved. But
Mm-hmm.
I love that next paragraph when they get over there about the prevailing social, cultural, political, economic, and
Mm-hmm.
academic logic that support or at ease with the status quo of grotesquely differential wealth and poverty,
Mm-hmm.
uneven access to the necessary resources for life and health, and forms of sublimely stubborn oppression masked by inside social conventions. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he just says a mouthful
Mm-hmm.
that. I mean, and and like you said, it's politically, it's economically, it's even a part of the institution of education because we 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 go and get an education or to uh, either become a part of that economic structure or go broke
Mm-hmm.
because we got so much student debt that
Mm-hmm.
we can hardly make it.
Well, and this is, and this is the kind of the advance or whatever that was made from these times into our times is that there's so many other layers of coercion put in place that they don't necessarily have to jail or torture everybody.
Right.
You can get people in debt and make it so that if they speak out, they can't eat. You know you can get yourself in a there's certain ways that if you like you say if you want to advance or you want to climb the ladder or whatever, you have to watch what you say. You have to be careful how you speak, you know, and on and on. There's a lot of layers before you get to the actual them needing to imprison you or torture you necessarily. There's a lot of other things that come before that.
Yeah, and I mean, and
Yeah.
the thing, Darren, when you said that bothered me so about my first pastorate because I was trying to empower the people in the church because you had a certain economic group.
Mm,
Here's a, a, a small rural church in a place that 99% of the people in Virginia had never heard of. I'd never heard of before I went there with three black millionaires in that church,
mm,
but
mhm,
they were afraid to empower everyday people. And I
mhm.
kept doing it till they finally, they just put me out. you
Right.
know, what
Mhm,
they hired me because I had my own business, so they didn't have to buy insurance for me and all that kind of stuff. And after we fixed
Right.
everything up, got a new organ, paid it off, added on to the building and paid it off. Time everything was paid off, they said, "We'll see you later." You know, it's
Right.
just,
Right.
you know, it's
Yeah.
just it's so ingrained, and and that's what King talks about in Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community,
Hmm.
talking about how it's not we try to label certain people as the problem, but it's professional people, people of position and power who
Hmm.
are pulling all the strings, causing
Hmm.
all of this to happen. And we go
Hmm.
there, they finished their education, benefited from social advantage, believed
Hmm.
appropriately, and followed the right confessions, theological, social, and economic.
Hmm.
So in
Right.
other words, you got to
Yeah.
follow that company line, that party line, that
Hmm.
theological line. And if you don't do that, you're a troublemaker, and
Right.
they'll bring you down, or they'll use your own people to bring you down.
Right. Yeah. And I think that the line in the paragraph before too, the status quo is always embodied in people with real power. The
Yeah,
power to imprison and torture us, and then, as I was saying, a lot more other powers as well. But that like you're saying, there's a certain set of elites that this power kind of coalesces in, and yeah, if you're not following the lead in the right way, you get yourself in trouble.
yeah. I
And
had
I think
another.
it's interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
I had another personal story about that. I was president of the Richmond Urban League, and so we have a big banquet every year at what was then the John Marshall Hotel. And so I really didn't invite him. William Clay, who was a congressman from St. Louis, came and spoke. And, he was one of the real radical members of the Black Caucus. And I got letters. Back then, we had a morning and an evening paper in Richmond.
Mm,
And I got letters from the editor of both papers. And like I said, I got that gift. So they couldn't get me by what I was writing. But I got
mhm,
called in because the Urban League was a part of the uh, United Way, fund.
mm,
The
mhm,
president of the United Way at that time was the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond. I got called into the Federal Reserve Bank. I've never been in there in my life, into the president's office, and was scolded for having William Clay come to speak. And
mm,
so,
mhm,
look, and so they told me, they said, well, just next year, just invite an athlete. And I
mm,
said to myself, I got him there. And so you know who I invited to come?
mm.
Arthur Ashe.
Right, right, right.
And he was more powerful in a calm way, turn down the
Mhm,
system than
mhm.
Clay was.
Right, right. Yeah.
So, so I'm still at 75 and having sold the pharmacies 10 years ago, which was a day many in power rejoiced in Richmond, because they said we don't have to deal with Edlo anymore.
Mhm.
But I'm
Yeah,
still a problem for some people,
yeah.
get cut off in the
No, but I
middle.
think that's a good story, to talk about. I mean, because like, I think in so many ways, from the church to so many of the institutions that are supposed to be, you know, helping address these needs that Jesus and the disciples were on the ground addressing, they all have to answer to these boards and to these funding people, and many churches have to answer to the big funders, that are the same people, the ones who sit on the sit in those positions of power. And from the churches to many of the nonprofits, and to these organizations, you get into a position where you're trying to figure out how to do the little bit you can and still get the money but you also realize that you're not actually saying the things you need to say, doing the things you need to do to actually change things the way they need to be changed. Because of course, the people in power that have all the holding the purse strings and calling you on the carpet, they don't want things to change. So,
Yeah, you got to have an endowment, and I mean a big endowment, and then you still limited because you still got to replace buildings and whatnot, and pay for so many things, but and people will tell you in a minute, that's what happened to me. They said, "Well, we're not gonna give," and I said, "Well, y'all not hurting me. Y'all hurting the church. I got a full-time job. I can go back to but people don't see that. They don't see that.
Yeah. No, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, and it is difficult. I mean, obviously, the big difference between us as many preachers today and the disciples in Jesus at the time is that, they weren't a professional, that, wasn't their profession, like it wasn't there, nowadays we get into a little bit of position ourselves because, it's our livelihood for many of us, and a lot of us are not much different than younger pastors are still paying off their debt, so they're trying to walk the line, to make sure they can pay off their debt and from all the schooling they got. And it's, you get yourself in a bind real quick.
Well, you got to do what people say, and in doing so, it just messes up the gospel. It waters the gospel down, and it gets so people just they say it's the same thing and nothing changes, and so they
yeah. Well, I think this I think to myself, I wonder, I mean, this commentary is so, I mean, it just says things in such a, just the right way, but also in a very, kind of loaded way that makes you have to kind of stop and think. And I just wonder, how accessible this is to just people in your congregation, it seems like the thing that people need to hear, but whether it's, whether it's actually something that people can hear, is a question I have. I wonder about it,
Yeah, I haven't used it, but in fact, I gave him an autographed copy of it to a friend of mine, and he used it to teach Acts in his Bible study. But I'm gonna have to, get some feedback on how people responded, because it's just so different. But look, we got to hit this one, because see, I got to go there. I'm going to Atlanta. We got to make a CE presentation. I got to speak at a banquet and then preach Sunday morning. But I might not be with you Monday. But it said Jesus never sought to escape the place of judgment. He planned to seize it. And
no, where was that at again? Let's see.
That's at the that's a couple of more paragraphs down. And then like you said before, power only sees power. Power only sees power. They don't see anything else.
Right here. Jesus never sought to escape the place of judgment. He planned to seize it. Yeah,
well, Cheryl, she has her comment up there. A lot of preachers don't preach what they've learned in school. They're afraid to. I'm like Sam Proctor now. I got my story, so don't nobody steal my stories from me. But he said,
right.
he told me that one day. He said, "Edlo, don't steal my stories." So I'm saying darn, and anybody don't steal my story. But I was in
Right.
seminar, and this guy kept watching me. And one evening he finally came over to me and he said, Edlo, somebody told me you're a pharmacist. I said, yeah. He said, isn't that a good profession? I said, oh, yeah. And, well, how are you doing? I'm doing all right. Well, why are you here? I said, because I feel like I'm called by God. But see, to a lot of people, it's just going there and getting that piece of paper, because a lot of churches say, they want somebody with a master's of divinity, or even at the church they're in saying, well, I've got this master divinity, so you got to pay me so much. And that's never been the case with me. I've never gotten master divinity pay, and now I got a master of theology, and I definitely don't get that. But that's the problem. You don't. We come to seminary with a Sunday school education, and even though we get all of these tools to look at things and to see things for real, we never talk about it. It's and that's what really bothers me, that we feel people aren't intelligent enough, and that you take a religion course from someone who doesn't believe in God or Jesus, and they'll teach you more than you learn in Sunday school.
Right.
And that's why, I try to teach my young people so much, because I know when they go to school, they're going to hear the real thing. I mean, just like I told them, look, God created everything, but, and Genesis is just their idea of what happened, because who was there to write it down, and so, and there's truth in it, because, and we get caught up on these things about, on the sixth day and the seventh day, when the Hebrew word could mean time periods, but nobody, it fights you when you say, well, God didn't rest on the seventh day, God rested in the seventh time period. And, and that's how I want to say that. That's religion's problem, because theology used to be the highest science, because we could explain God. And then when, this scientific method, when we could reproduce things, they didn't want to accept that. And I mean, they kill people because they said, that everything didn't rotate around the earth.
Yeah. No, but
and that's why we have to see guys like Jennings who have taken a deeper dive and looking at this thing in a much different way than some of those commentaries. I've got logos, so there's some good commentaries and logos, and some dogs in there.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes a certain series has a good one and a bad one, even in the same series. One time it'll be good, the next book you're like, oh, this ain't so great. But no, I appreciate that, Cheryl. Yeah, well, yeah, sure. Well, yeah, sure. We'll probably still be in reading the chapter 4 section. So that's just page. It's pages. Well, I don't, in the Kindle. I don't know how it looks in the Kindle, because you said you got the Kindle.
Kindle.
Mine says page. In the Kindle, mine says page 44 to 44 to about 50 something.
Yeah, but it's real clear,
About 20%. About 20% through the book, it says chapter 4, 1 through 37. We'll still be in that little section. So the criminal disciple emerges. So if you do get it and you want to read it, that'd be great. Show you can type your questions in, and maybe even we might even send you the link. You can jump on here with us. If you got some questions, we'll figure it out. So that'll be fun. That's how everybody else got here. I asked them to come on one night, and we just kept doing it. So
yeah, it kept growing.
We might have a whole panel. Might have a whole panel by the time we finish here.
Because you can bring about 24 people, can't you? If you want to.
What's that?
You can bring about 20 people in, I think.
Yeah. No, you can get a lot of people in here. I think I can't remember what the number is, but yeah. All right. Well, then we'll have a good trip. When do you leave?
I'm leaving Thursday. I got a board meeting Friday morning at 8, and then I make my presentation at 1 o'clock, and then Saturday. My father was one of the founders of the organization, along with the dean of the pharmacy school I went to. So
Okay.
they want me to speak about them at the gala reception that evening, and then
Nice.
Sunday morning, the guy I told you, Lynn, asked to when they met the last time live in Houston. I wasn't going, so I told him, asked him would he go for me. He preached a prayer breakfast. He's a pharmacist and he doesn't have a church yet, and so he called me. He said, "Can you preach this year?" And so since he had done it for me, I'm gonna do it for him this time.
Nice.
And then I'm gonna come on back up that road.
Yeah. Well, that sounds good. All right. Well, we'll see you next week. Hopefully
next
we'll
week,
get,
I may just listen in because I'm.
Oh yeah. You'll be worn out.
I'm getting old. I'm getting old. Got to take a lot of naps.
Well, we should have it. We should have Marcy and Mark back hopefully. So yeah.
All right.
I don't know what I'd do if I got left alone. That's how I started doing it, but I don't know if I could do that anymore. We'll see. But
when I saw everybody bailing out, I said, "Let me come on in."
Yeah. I appreciate it. All right. Well, safe travels. Yeah.
All right. Thank you now.